with you. I'll go ahead and do our little opening welcome. So now that we're being recorded, good evening, everyone, and welcome to First United Methodist Church Community Panel on Affordable Housing. My name is Fran Byrne, and I'm a member of the Discernment team, which is hosting these community panels. So I want to thank and introduce our two panelists for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us this evening. We have Don Stump, who is the recently retired CEO of Christian Church Homes of Northern California, and Jen Klose, who's Executive Director of Generation Housing, AKA Gen H. And I think everyone knows our moderator is Bob Cheel. Thank you, Bob. We're going to start out with each panelist offering a brief overview of their agency's work. And we also hope to discern how our church can have an impact on the crisis of affordable housing in our area. This would be followed by a Q&A segment, and you can type your questions into the chat box at any time throughout the presentation or just ask afterwards. So let's go ahead and get started. And Don, we're going to go ahead and start with you. Don will be focusing on affordable housing for seniors. And I think he's the co-host because he'll be using slides. So thank you, Don.
Okay. Thanks very much, Fran. So I'll say a few basic words first. I worked at Christian Church Homes in Oakland for 45 years. My dad was the president of Christian Church Homes when it was first founded a long time ago. So I've been doing senior housing since I was in kindergarten. So I've been doing that a very long time. CCH was founded in 1961. And is now 60 plus years old, I guess. I still work part-time on behalf of the company, trying to do affordable housing development opportunities around the country. CCH has about 55 properties these days, and they're in 7 different states. So I travel around the country and try and work with various churches to do senior housing in various places. I'd like to show a few pictures of some of our properties, and then I will try and I'm going to share a screen here if I can. What do I have to do to share a screen? Just start. So I just put a PowerPoint up. Can you all see that?
You should be able to, Don, down at the bottom of your screen, you might see share screen.
Share screen. Oh, bingo.
Yes, do that, and then you'll be able to choose from the icons that pop up which one you want to share.
Okie dokie. How about now? Okay, so there we go.
Working. Thank you.
Right, so that is CCH, and that's our official logo, more than a home, providing affordable, quality housing in caring communities. I'll just show you a few pictures of some of those. This is in Oakland, right near the Oakland Berkeley borderline. This is a building built in cooperation with a local Catholic church. We are co-owners of this with a Catholic church in downtown Oakland, 44 apartments. This is down in the Central Valley of California, Visalia. There is a coalition of 4 different Protestant denominations down there that does community work and community organizing. And we are partnering with that coalition of churches down there to build these 60 units in Visalia, California. This is in the city of San Leandro. This was owned by a Presbyterian church, and it was getting to be an older, affordable housing place that was growing old and falling apart. And the Presbyterian church sold it to Christian Church Homes. We used tax credits to refinance it and rehab it. And now CCH is the sole owner, and it's been through a modernization. This is in Oakland, in what has been historically a pretty rough part of Oakland. And I would say that this site used to be what's called a no-tell motel. I don't know if all you church guys know what a no-tell motel is, but bad things happen in this motel. And so the city took the property by eminent domain and asked Christian Church Homes if they could convert it to affordable senior housing. So we tore down the motel, got an architect and designed this building and put 61 units of affordable senior housing on that location. It's a screaming success. The neighborhood loved it, city council loved it, the mayor loved it. So a really nice program. I don't know if you know the little city of Crockett, California, very near the Benicia Bridge. Crockett is not actually a city; it's only a unincorporated area. But there's a piece of vacant land next to the C&H sugar factory that CCH bought and built 37 units in the city of Crockett. This is in West Sacramento. West Sacramento is actually a separate city than Sacramento. And this was our second case of no-tell motels. Again, the city of West Sacramento used eminent domain to claim this property. And we used tax credits and money from the state of California and partial Section 8 to provide 87 units of senior housing in West Sacramento. Over in the city of Chico, we are partnered here with a Catholic community development organization. They had never done real estate development, but they wanted to do senior services. So we are 50-50 owners here with a Catholic services organization in the city of Chico. This is in San Francisco. We are partnered here with a Baptist church. The Baptist church gave us their parking lot, and we put senior housing on it. And below the senior housing is 2 decks of parking. Half of that parking is for the Baptist church, so their members can still come to church and park in the parking structure. And the other half of the parking structure is for the senior housing. That building's been up and running for about 10 years now. In Napa, not too far from you guys, there's a street called Jefferson, and we had this very creative name called Jefferson Street Senior Housing. We're in a residential neighborhood here, and the neighbors did not want us to build a 3-story building right looking down over their backyards. So we had to do some creative design of the building to have it step back from the edge of the property. So we have this large driveway in the front, and the front of the church, front of the building is only 2 stories, and the 3 stories part's kind of in the back. An attempt to try and fit into the neighborhood and not be perceived as a monstrosity in a residential neighborhood. Downtown Oakland, the tall building in the back is the Oakland Housing Authority. And we are co-developers here and co-owners with the Oakland Housing Authority here. There used to be a Chevron gas station on this station, and Chevron moved out and cleaned up their site, and we secured multiple sources of funding to start building this building. As soon as the backhoe put his shovel in the ground to start digging up the foundation, when he pulled up the backhoe, he pulled up a 55-gallon barrel of oil that the previous Chevron gas station had just buried in the ground there. So construction stopped for 6 months while we had to go to the EPA and the state of California and clean the site again. That sucked up all of our contingency money in our construction budget, but we finally got it built, and it's been open for about 6 years. This is in a similar story in a little city of Aptos, California, south of Santa Cruz. There was a lot of vacant land there, and a very upper-end developer came in there and wanted to build 500 upper-end luxury homes and make a gigantic development. And the county of Santa Cruz told him that he needed to have some kind of affordable component. So he gave us 5% of his land and $500,000 in cash as a source to us to build this building. And with the land and some of his cash, we put in 80 units of affordable housing right in the middle of an upper end development. The property is very sharp and clean and modern, and it's really hard to tell it from the upper end housing that's all around there. This property won the Golden Nugget Architectural Award. That's a award given to architects for building nice looking buildings. This is a fun building up in the city of Redding, California. If you know history on California railroads, when you were a railroad worker in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, you'd work your 8-hour shift, jump off the train, and stay in a railroad hotel, and then get back on the next morning and go back to work on the train. So this is an old railroad hotel that had sat empty in the city of Redding for about 20 years and was an eyesore to the city and was kind of falling apart. We bought this building for $1 from the city of Redding and used tax credits and other funding sources to completely rehab it and do seismic bracing. And it's now open for business for seniors. The first floor is retail. Kind of over in the far left-hand corner of that red building, you can see a little sign that says Deja Vu. That's a restaurant that's on the first floor. And above it is 3 stories of senior housing with 77 apartments for the seniors in Redding, California. City of Antioch, 65 units. Every building has a unique story. This was surplus land from the Antioch School District. Don't know if you know any political stuff about schools, but schools, if they used state money to buy their land for a school, they cannot turn around and sell it. It's not proper to use state money to buy the land and then sell the land and take the money. So the school district could not sell us this land, but they did not want to use it for anything for the foreseeable future. So we have a 60-year lease on this land. And we paid that lease with development dollars. Rather than pay them $100,000 a year to lease the land, we paid them $4 million cash up front as a prepayment of 60 years lease money. So we have a 60-year lease to have this land, and we have 65 apartments in the city of Antioch for seniors. It's a good deal with everybody. It's a win-win deal all the way around. And this is our very first building we ever built, 1961 in the city of Santa Cruz. It's since been rehabbed and it looks a lot more modern now. This is one of the old original pictures. I have an amazing piece of useless trivia for you here. In our denomination, the Christian Church Disciples of Christ, there's been 2 or 3 presidents of the United States that were disciples. One of those was President Garfield. So this property is named after President Garfield because he was a disciple in our denomination. Another building in Santa Cruz, 35 units of Section 8 housing for seniors. This building was sitting too low and had to be elevated because it was close to the California coast. When you build close to the coast, you are subject to the Coastal Commission. And so the Coastal Commission had their regulations, the city had regulations, the county had regulations. So this entire parcel had to be raised 6 feet up in the air to get away from any contamination going into the local rivers and lakes. And we spent several weeks trucking in soil and compacting it to lift this piece of property 6 feet in the air before we could build a building. I'm sure you're enjoying all this amazing trivia here. This is one of the smallest buildings we have in downtown Oakland. It's across the street from a Methodist church. Bishop Roy C. Nichols is the name of a Methodist church there. They had a piece of land that they had never used. And so we bought this land from their church and built 17 units right across the street from the church. Antioch, California. This building is 50 units. It's built right into a residential neighborhood. And again, the neighborhood did not want a tall apartment house looking over their fences. So this is a part of the property that is 1-story cottages. And right behind us, behind that fence in the background is a local neighborhood. And the part you can't see off screen is a 3-story apartment house that faces A Street in Antioch, which is more of a commercial street. So the front half of the property has a little more of a commercial look. The back half of the property has a more of a residential look in order to fit in. And it's all one big happy property with 50 apartments for seniors. I think we're done. Okay, now the quiz. I'm going to go through it again and you guys can tell me all this stuff I just said. So that's kind of a picture speaks 1,000 words. You can see our properties there and stuff we've been doing for the last 60 years. I just showed you about 1/3 of our properties. So that's I will stop there for a while anyway. Thank you.
Great, Don. Go ahead and stop sharing. That should be up at
thank
the
you.
top of your screen.
We can't hear you, Bob.
You're muted,
You're
Bob.
muted, Bob.
I muted myself. What quantity of land is required for that? How many acres does it take to really do some of the small projects versus some of the large projects?
Gosh, it's tough to say. Depends on how high you go. If you have 3 acres, you can do something. I believe you have probably, as a wild guess there, 6 or 7 surplus acres that you're not using. So you ought to be able to put 75 to 100 units on there, I would think.
I see. Could you describe for me how a land lease works?
Yeah, so it's every real estate deal is unique based on what the city and county want and what the funding sources will do and what the current owners of the land want. So you have to construct a unique thing every single time. If you have 10 kids in your family, all 10 kids are different. So it happened with also we had a situation with a Catholic church in Oakland. The Catholic church wants to hang on to their land. The largest landowner on the planet Earth is the Catholic Church. And the Catholic Church has a policy of once they own land, they don't let go of it. So they didn't want to sell their land for senior housing in Oakland. That was the very first picture I showed in the slideshow. It's a green looking building. So we leased that land from the Catholic Church for 60 years by paying them several $1 million up front as 60 years of rental money to lease your land. 60 years from now, the lease will expire. And we'll have to renegotiate as to who owns this building. When you fund a building with the tax credit program, the tax credit program doesn't want to give you dollars unless they're very sure that the site's going to be locked up for a very long time. And so the tax credit program has requirements saying that if you're leasing land, it has to be for a very long time, 50 or 60 years.
Very good. Thank you. I think let's open up for a couple more questions before we go to Jen Klose and Generation Housing. And David, do you have a question there?
Yeah, just a quick one. That lease, there was an upfront payment. Was that the only payment, or was there then also subsequent payments in the term? Did it spread out?
That was the only payment, because when you're doing a real estate development, you're probably raising money from 7 or 8 sources, and you hope to find $40 or $50 million to play with. So you have money up front. You can pay $5 million toward a lease fee up front. As operations go on, operations are not as rich as development. We're renting to low-income seniors. We have Section 8. There's very rarely surplus cash out of monthly or annual operations. So that type of thing has to come out of the upfront development cost.
Great, thank you. Any other questions before we move on to Jen? And we can always get back to questions for you as well, Don, after Jen speaks. So at this point, why don't we go ahead and turn it over to Jen Klose, and she can speak, tell us more about Generation Housing and the kind of work that you're doing.
Thank you, Bob. And thanks, Fran, for reaching out, and to all of you for inviting me and wanting to learn more about this and more about housing solutions. And I first want to just start and say that, Don, what you've done is super impressive. And he could, I'll tell you what, a tax credit affordable housing deal is maybe, top 5 most complicated business deals on the planet. And it's, we do a housing 101 workshop that kind of zooms through that. And it is like the tiny, tiny top layer of just to kind of get your head around it. And I've been to day-long trainings, and I feel like I'm just starting to really get it. And so it's super impressive. And then you add things like the Coastal Commission and stuff like that. And you're talking about complex deal, which is part of the problem with respect to our housing crisis. So I'm Jen, Executive Director of Generation Housing, where we champion more and more affordable and more diverse housing. And we have been in existence since January 2020. I think we're still pretty new, and so our genesis story is important. And so after the 2017 wildfires, the Community Foundation, Sonoma County, commissioned a housing and philanthropy expert to do a study locally to say, what are the barriers to housing production here, and then what are the potential solutions? Because while housing had been a problem for some decades, a week-long fire significantly exacerbated that. And I think it also just brought it kind of front and center into the community's consciousness and across sectors. So it was not only a problem, but kind of an opportunity to get folks moving in a collaborative way to solve that. So her conclusions was that the number one problem was a lack of public and political will. And so the number one solution to that is we need a local housing advocacy organization that is dedicated to this, and also is willing and committed to working across sectors and to getting the whole community involved at all levels. And so they invited a group of volunteers who volunteered for a year. I was one of them, and we were at the time called the Cross-Sector Housing Leadership Team, which rolls right off the tongue. And I was invited at the time wearing my education hat because I was the Santa Rosa School Board president at the time when we were the most impacted district in the Tubbs fire. So for a year, we worked on incubating this organization. And the first 6 months was really to answer the question, do we really need to exist? Because really the last thing Sonoma County needs is another nonprofit. But we decided, and based on community feedback, that yes, we do. And then the next second 6 months was about figuring out what we should do, what our priorities should be, and kind of what best practices would be based on successful other organizations, analogs throughout the Bay Area and across the country. So we launched in January 2020. We kind of really hit the ground running, immediately actually leading the effort at the state level to advocate for our fair share of low income housing tax credits, specifically for wildfire impacted areas. Congressman Thompson had lobbied to get a huge increase to the tax credits for wildfire impacted areas. And when the state organization that allocates those tax credits came out with the initial regulations, it was clear that we were going to get nothing, even though we were the second most impacted county after Butte. So we launched a pretty big advocacy effort and got lots of folks involved. The PD was very generous and gave us full page ads to do open letter to the governor and the treasurer. We showed up at lots of meetings with lots of different folks and ended up getting actually a little more than our fair share because Butte wasn't ready to use all its tax credits. And that was a good effort. And frankly, I think if that's like the only thing we ever did was get $150 million more in tax credits, that this would be a big success. But it was also good because it kind of put us on the map and instantly got us moving. So that's we've been doing that, and I will that's kind of the genesis story. We've been working since then, and I'll share my screen now and give you a little bit more information. Let's see. I'm in a new home office setup, and so hopefully I won't share my text messages, which I have done before. Okay, I think you're in the right place. You see the Generation Housing blue screen, yeah?
Yes,
All right.
we're good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, good. So we do, I mean, I think it's not news to you, otherwise you wouldn't be having this, but we have a pretty significant housing challenge here. People call it a crisis. I try to get away from that because a crisis seems like something that's time limited and also maybe not solvable. But so I call it a challenge because I think we're ready to undertake some solutions to that challenge. But our home prices have skyrocketed over the years, particularly in the pandemic, as you know. And nearly 50% of our homeowners are cost burdened, and almost 60% of our renters. Overall, it's about 55% of our residents. And cost burden, if you don't know, means that you are paying more than 30% of your income on housing. And it's determined by federal government that if you pay more than 30% of your income on housing, that you cannot meet your basic needs. This is not true. Because it's not income limited, this formula. So let's say you make $300,000 a year and you pay 50% of your income on housing, you still have $150,000 to make ends meet. And I think you may or may not have the life you want, but you're gonna make ends meet your basic needs just fine. If you make $33,000 because you're a farm worker or a child care worker or a caregiver, and you pay half your income, and that's very common, on housing, then you've got $16,000 left to meet your basic needs. And if you got a family or even as a single person, that is not a lot of money. We talk a lot about cost burden, how many people are paying too much, how many people are in this situation. And I really try to change the conversation to the impact of that. If you're paying too much rent or too much in a mortgage, what aren't you paying for? And we are actually doing, and we're just concluding actually a big study locally to answer that question, to help put a real human face, a real focus on the impact of cost burden, to help people make decisions, evidence-based decisions, and to help us do our work in advocacy. So that will be released in September. And I think it's real important for folks to know the actual impact of that and how that changes as your income drops, and how our lower wage workers are our lower wage earners are the most impacted, most acutely feeling this. All right, how did we get here really fast? We just stopped building. We've been building not enough since the late 80s as our population and jobs have increased, and especially our low wage jobs. But then at the Great Recession, we pretty much stopped building. And hadn't really picked up. Recently, we picked up some. The numbers are a little bit deceptive because of fire rebuilds, but we are increasing production and making some progress. We have way too many low wage jobs compared to affordable homes. Almost 3 low wage jobs to every affordable home. Different cities are different. Sebastopol has 8 low wage jobs to every affordable home. Healdsburg around 6, Sonoma around 6. And you know what that ultimately means is that there are lots of people driving cars on the road, contributing to our greenhouse gas emissions, contributing to our traffic, and definitely taking away from the quality of those folks' lives. So it has other repercussions as well, but that's a major one. This is just, I'm going to send you these. Actually, I'm going to send you a longer one that has more information. This is sort of the short one, if you can believe it. So I'll sort of whiz through these and you can look at them more carefully in your free time. This just gives you an idea of some of the most common low wage earning jobs in the county, and what kind of rent they would need to pay in order to be able to meet their other basic needs based on the cost burden formula. And basically, as you can see, pretty much our low wage earners need rent of under $1,000 a month to be able to live well. And you can see here that doesn't exist here. This is actually outdated now. The overall rent has topped $2,000 at this point. This is somewhat outdated, and the new data shows that it's actually gone up. So it doesn't exist. There are, and this is having lots of impacts. And one of them is that folks are leaving, and you're probably reading about that. Population here is decreasing, and the population that is decreasing are our younger folks, our younger professionals, our young families. The number of kids is significantly decreasing, which doesn't really bode well for the future of our county. Economically, it certainly doesn't bode well for the future of our county with respect to our impact on the climate, because lots of people are going to be driving in to do their job and probably driving in cars that are not super healthy. So it's pretty significant. But there are people who say, well, why do we care? If people are leaving, you know, problem solved. People are leaving, we don't have enough houses. That's exactly what needs to happen. And the last thing we need to do is build more houses. And, you know, my response to this is first of all, is that really the way we want people to make decisions? Do we want to force people out of the place where they want to live? And the kids who grew up here and your children and grandchildren, do we want them to not be able to stay where they'd like to be? We need to care because of our environment. I've said a couple times, you know, the impact of lack of affordable housing is a climate change issue for our economy. I said that too. We need to be, we need to have the population here that drives our economy and keeps it going in a healthy and balanced way. And then also just like the general health of the community. And I mean that in sort of the broadest sense and individual sense. Health outcomes are significantly decreased for people who are housing insecure or who are paying too much for housing. This is and every hospital has to do an annual community needs assessment. And every one of our hospitals for the last several years will say that housing and homelessness is the most important issue, #1 by far in Sonoma County. And it is impacting their ability to deliver care. It's impacting the health outcomes of those folks. And these impacts are most acutely felt by our low-wage earners and our communities of color. 1 in 4 children of everyone in Sonoma County live in overcrowded households, and that's one of the impacts of cost burden, right? You give up things like dental care and health care and healthy food and educational enrichment and time off and saving things. But then sort of next step is you move in 2 families to a house or 3 families to a house and live in an overcrowded household. And if in our county, if you're Latino, you are 10 times more likely to live in an overcrowded household. And this was a major driver in the pandemic, where Latinos were 9 times more likely to contract COVID and had much greater impact because it was more before the vaccines were out, and that was really directly most correlated to overcrowding. Education is really connected, and education is one of the social determinants of health. And so, you know, there's a impact, a ripple effect to having your education impacted. But 54% of our JC students are housing insecure, and almost a quarter have experienced homelessness at one time during their attendance. Our kids in Santa Rosa City Schools, you've probably, and we know, I have the data from this that's broken out, but this is actually across Sonoma County. But I wanted to look at the different grades, their responses. But the Youth Truth Survey asked the students what their major community concern was. And #1 was affordable housing. That's the top pressing community need, 96% of them. And when you break out the data, that's elementary school kids, middle school kids, high school kids, and their parents and teachers. So it's something that they think about. In terms of how they're directly impacted in terms of their educational outcomes, there's a correlation between educational outcome and cost burden. But we really saw how that worked during the pandemic, when teachers through distance learning got to see into the homes of some students and got to see some of the chaos that a lot of the students lived in, and realized that those students, you know, even outside of the pandemic, didn't have a quiet place to study, didn't have a quiet place just to relax and recover and attend to their mental health and have some space to do, you know, appropriate development. So it's super connected and important for our kids. Like I've said several times, you know, and Governor Newsom, he's made a point of this, is connecting housing and climate. And, you know, for many years, and Don can probably attest to this, the environmental community was sometimes a barrier to housing production. That was sometimes a crew of NIMBYs right there. And for various reasons, and certainly probably well-intentioned, But now the environmental leadership, environmental community is really coming together with the pro-housing community, realizing that you can be both pro-housing and pro-environment. We certainly at Generation Housing value our local environment and want to be conscious of everything that we support being part of any kind of climate action plan. And so, but this is now seen as a tool to deal with climate change, is that we need to build housing where people work to get them off the road, to reduce VMTs or vehicle miles traveled. This is a major tool we can have to reduce greenhouse gases. New housing is also generally more sustainably built and just healthier in general. And I think Don can tell you that affordable housing actually has the highest, most stringent standards if they're getting tax credits. So, you know, economic vitality here in our community, both as a community level, on a community level and an individual level, is really connected to housing. Home ownership is one of the most economically stabilizing forces a family can have. It's a way to break out of cycles of poverty. And we don't have much opportunity for home ownership in low wage earners, or now even our middle class workers are the bulk of our workforce. It is real tough. And if you're paying too much for rent, you are definitely not participating much in our local economy. So it really does slow down the economy. Our largest employers, I talk to them a lot, and they will constantly say that housing is their number one concern as an employer, because they can't attract and retain the workforce that they need. And that is from low wage workers to specialty doctors to everyone in between. You know, this inability to attract workforce is impacting our local businesses. And there are some who are leaving, and there are some who are kind of on the verge of leaving because of this. I think, you know, economically speaking, the opportunity here is that the solution to lack of housing, which is build more housing, is also a real powerful economic engine. Particularly affordable housing can be a powerful economic engine in terms of creating jobs and really buoying the income significantly and disposable income of the people who live there. But all housing development is a boon for the economy. It's bringing money in. The other reason why affordable housing is good for the local economy also is that it's always bringing in free money, and from the state or federal government. So in terms of our community's resilience, this is important. And I won't, you know, I don't want to waste too much time doing this, but I want you to read this cartoon later, and it really shows how there's a trickle down effect of someone losing their home. And this is from Brian Feast's fire story. He lost his home in the Tubbs fire and wrote this graphic novel that won lots of awards, and he let me use this with his permission. And I think it's just a great way to show how all folks are impacted and how that we're all connected in this housing system. It's not just an individual thing. But in terms of disaster preparedness and building community resilience, disaster practitioner guidebooks now say that building affordable housing is actually a disaster preparedness strategy, that we are much more impacted, that our resilience is much better if people are safely, stably housed, and we can weather the kind of disasters that we have faced, unfortunately, here relentlessly over and over again. So that's there's the challenge, and also the intersection of housing. I wasn't a housing developer. I was a lawyer, and I was really, my community work was primarily around education. Sort of my interest is upstream, but it was really after the fires that I realized how housing is really connected to all aspects of our community, and how it's really, I think the most powerful lever that we can pull right now to lift folks up in every way, for the reasons I just explained. So what do we need? This is it's a little daunting, but we wanted to have a real number after the fires. There were all kinds of numbers shouted out. Jimmy Dore said 30,000. One economist said 75,000. California Housing Partnership said 16,000 just in affordable units. Lots of numbers. I said, if we're going to, talk about building housing, we need to make sure we know exactly what we need. So we did some research. Jesus Guzman, our first policy director, who's also an economist, did some modeling developed by Spur, a urban development think tank in the South Bay, and came up with we need 58,000 homes. And that's by 2030. We are 38,000 behind now. We need 20 more in the next decade. And that's housing units. So it's important to understand that that's going to be a studio apartment, a single family home, the units, a 50 unit complex, like a senior housing project like Don described, but we need 58,000 housing units. It's a lot, and that is daunting and kind of a punch in the gut when you first see it. But I like to break it down by year and say it's about 6,000 units a year. And that's about what we developed in the 80s and early 90s. And it's about what Boise is developing. And there are lots of folks who are developing at this rate. So it's hard. It's a big challenge, but I think that if everyone can do something, we might be there. I was listening to a housing podcast. Let's forget the name of the podcast. But our attorney general was on talking about housing, and he said, no one can solve this. No one can do everything, but everyone's got to do something. So I appreciate that you're here saying like, we want to be part of the solution, because that's what we need is more people saying we need to be part of the solution. So our work in our organization is solution oriented, and we have kind of 4 buckets of work. The first one is project advocacy, where when projects are threatened either by resistance from the jurisdiction they're in or by organized neighbors or NIMBYs, some people call them, we will go out and advocate for them if they get our endorsement. We have a pretty specific rubric that we created driven by our guiding principles that include real strong equity values and environmental sustainability values. But if you get our endorsement, then we're going to go out and advocate for you and turn out with public comment and petitions and letters and do that. And we've done that pretty successfully thus far. And I'd say we've advocated for lots of units that have gotten entitled, more than 4,000. But there are about 3 projects that I absolutely believe would not have received their entitlements or basically permission to build their projects had we not been there. Most recently, a project in Cloverdale that was 75 affordable units, half of which were reserved for farm workers. So that's one part of our work. We do policy advocacy and development. My belief is that, the real bang for your buck going forward is changing policy. We have real housing disparities. We have continued segregation in our geography, in our cities, which means we have segregated schools. And that is all based on policy that has existed for a long time. And so I think the only way you get out of that is changing policy to make some real lasting impact and real systems change. And some of that policy is making it easier for developers. It's hard to build in Sonoma County. It's hard to build in Sonoma County. I don't know how the subtitles just said they want to do something, but I don't know how to deal with that, so I'm going to ignore it. And it's expensive, and it barely pencils out. And so some of the things that we can do to help with that is to make it faster through policy and make it cheaper through policy. We also are not attracting a lot of developers because of that unpredictability and expense. So any way that we can do that to attract folks to our area and help them build faster and cheaper is real important. We also can use policy to help do things like desegregate and build low-income housing in high resource areas, things like that will help our community in a broader sense. All right, third thing, and this is kind of related, is we work collaboratively to find finance solutions. We work really closely with the Renewal Enterprise District, which is a JPA between the city and the county that came together after the fires to come up with finance solutions to building. And we try to work collaboratively with anyone who has financing solutions. Like right now, we are working with a big developer to come up with a pre-leasing model where employers share the risk with the developer and enter into pre-leases, which helps that developer get better financing and get things done. So anything we can do to lower the cost and get things done is helpful. So those are three. And then the fourth one that is kind of overarching is really, what our main cause, what all this comes under, which is changing public and political will. And none of this can be done well, this kind of advocacy that I just talked about, unless we make sure that there's a real pro-housing ethic in the community, or at least that there's enough folks that bring a counter voice to people who still oppose it. But we really believe that what we need to do in this public will work, that it's a campaign, and we do have splashy visuals and messages, but it's really a campaign that has to operate in parallel with the policy work, with the project advocacy, so that we can change both sort of culture and policy, not unlike other really successful public will building campaigns like Mothers Against Drunk Driving or Give a Hoot, Don't Pollute, things like that. So we developed a campaign that you may have seen around. We developed it with a social justice marketing firm that has done other big campaigns you might have seen, like when Facebook goes pink for Planned Parenthood, that's their campaign. Save Darfur, that's their campaign. Fight for 15. So they worked with us, and then also we have a local designer that worked on this. And the whole idea for this campaign, which, and this is the first phase of the campaign, is to get away from buildings as the topic and move towards people. And people that are just the regular people that we work with every day, or we miss during the pandemic, that we rely on, that we know, to put a human face on this, and a face that isn't a stereotypical person that some folks think live in affordable housing, a welfare mom or someone right off the street, someone like that. They're just, the people in our community. And you'll see that in the whole campaign, there's only one building, and that's because it's a construction worker. But other than that, it's only people. And we're really starting with a very simple message, because we want to start where everyone can agree. And that's that, my grandson needs an affordable place to live, and grocers need affordable places to live. So we have 2 more phases of the campaign coming forward. The next one, which you'll start seeing in the Press Democrat soon, is around environmental concerns, housing is climate. And then sort of phase 3 is the one where I think we'll sort of push people in their thinking the most, and address some of the myths that cause people to oppose affordable housing. Things like it's going to increase crime or decrease my property value, neither of which are true based on the data. But those are hard conversations sometimes, because they are real fears. They may not be real factually in terms of, but they are real fears. So that's our campaign. And like I said, the campaign is not just images. We have to do the work along with it. So part of it is we also want to tell specific stories. So we have a number of housing stories specific to people in Sonoma County to tell what they have experienced, and to really put a human face on it that is specific to here. We do lots of educational events. This is just some of them, and you can find them, almost all of them, on our YouTube channel. And the events really center around the intersection between housing and the other quality of life issues like I discussed. Coming up, this is an old slide. We already had our environmental and housing justice fund, and our housing element just passed last week. We're going to have a housing is education youth town hall this summer. We had another one about a year and a half ago. It was really popular, and we have a whole youth panel talk about impact of housing on them and their future. We'll do a housing is health, and then a cost burden report release event that's coming up. We also have been doing some research to really help our decision makers make educated, data-driven decisions. That's one of the things we heard in incubation, was that folks didn't have enough information, and that staff did not have time to produce it because they're too busy just doing their everyday jobs. So we've been trying to do research to help folks out. We did a State of Housing in Sonoma County report, and there's a big event on YouTube related to that. And it's a good resource where you can, it's all publicly available data, but we crunched it, and so that we can have a good resource there. And like I said, we've got this cost burden report coming next.
Great.
we get people involved with the action team, and you can sign up to be part of that. And that just means that you get alerts when things are going on. We have an opportunity to make an impact, and you can show up at a city council meeting. You can write an email, you can sign one of our petitions. We try to make it a light lift, and we've got hundreds of people doing that now, and that's exciting. We're trying to get lots of different people involved. We really have, and I'm almost done. We really have I take pride in the fact that a lot of the electeds are really supportive of us because they're the same people that we're pushing sometimes. So the fact that we're advocating to them and they're supporting us, I think means that we are really poised to make an impact. This is kind of around the tax credit effort that I showed you first. Like I said, we've endorsed several thousand units, about half of which have been affordable, and also seeded our own local housing fund to do gap financing. I think you all want to talk about solutions and ways that you can be involved, and there are lots of ways you can be involved. You can, on an individual level, if you have an extra room, you can rent it through Share Sonoma. You can build an ADU if you have space. If your church has land, this is an amazing way. There's a movement called YIGBY, yes in God's backyard, and you can be part of that if you have land and develop on it property tax free. And if you're interested in that, I'd love to help put you together with people, or maybe Dawn can, to help facilitate that. And also on the advocacy front, the policy and project front in general, you can invest in generation housing. I try to say we're a really good leveraged investment, because you can spend $650,000 on a single affordable housing unit, but we operate in a year for $850, and I think we're having some great impact. And again, and you can just put your name into our website to get action alerts or sign up as a member. It's important that we have a big membership, and you can join at whatever your comfort level is, starting at $5. We just want to be able to go to our policymakers and say, join X number of generation housing members in supporting this or that. And with that, we like to say we are Gen H, meaning we are the generation, all of us. It's not age-based, but we're the ones who want to change this. We're the ones that are going to take action against this problem.
Great, thank you. I'd like to ask, open up for questions. I know our target has been for 1 hour, and we're just about at that point. But I think it's important to give time for questions if we have them, and please. What specific questions might we have right now? John, do you have a question?
Yeah, first I'd like to thank Jen for explaining what generation housing does. We've seen a desperate need for a change in the story, a change in what people picture when they picture affordable housing. And I didn't realize that there was an organization dedicated to making that change. And I'm excited about the possibility of supporting that. And Don, I'm interested in knowing, it sounds like you've got a number of models for who manages as well as who develops the properties. So are some of those partnerships, or how does that work?
Yep. We have some where the original church is in the partnership structure. You often end up with the ownership not as a corporation, but as a partnership, limited LP, limited partnership. The primary funding source for building affordable housing is the tax credit program, both federal tax credits and state tax credits. So when a nonprofit like CCH or your church applies for tax credits and you get awarded 10 million in tax credits, that's probably useless to you because you don't pay taxes. So the way that works is you take your $10 million award and sell it to the highest bidding bank. And there are brokers that do that for you. And the Bank of America might buy your tax credits. Wells Fargo, Bank of the West might buy your tax credits, and they give you cash. And then they have the tax credits. When that happens, the ownership structure ends up as a partnership. It's the developer and the investing bank and the perhaps the original owner of the land, which would be your church. The bank wants the developer to be at least the 51% partner. The bank doesn't want to put 10 or $20 million at risk on a piece of real estate, and their primary partner is a nonprofit church. So the church can be in there, can be in the partnership structure, but they cannot be the 51% partner. So does that speak to your question at all, John?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, long answer to a short question. I would
other
also
questions?
just say, in general, for everybody to know that this is a long process.
Mhm.
You need to be aware that it'll take 3 years to get pretty serious and to get a plan laid out. If we can break ground and start construction within 4 years, it would be a miracle. So you need to know that you're signing on for the long haul here.
And I'll add to that, Don, if I can, that in Sonoma County, in the last 10 years, the average of conception to entitlement is actually 7 years. It's even longer here, which is part of the problem, and that's what we're really trying to change, although a lot of policy's already been changed locally to speed that process, but it is a long haul. He's right.
Yep.
I see David there is raised his hand.
Yes, Dwayne DeWitt is here with me. You can see him on the screen, and he has a
This is a question for Don. I'll basically ask you, have you heard that here in Santa Rosa, we've been utilizing financing through what are called project-based vouchers in the Section 8 housing program? And our housing authority has been specifically putting aside veterans vouchers for both the county and the city, and putting a lot of money aside to help people do these types of projects. So by you nodding your head, I see you understand that. I'll add a little to this. 25 years ago, we set up a Sonoma County Housing Advocacy Group here in this county. I'm a member of it, David's a member of it. And throughout this whole process, all these years, planning has been politics. The reason why much of this takes so long is the politics. Considering perhaps if you used the site that we call Stony Point, would you be interested in perhaps working with seniors and veterans? We have a bit of an idea of senior and veterans extended stay suites, using the model of hotel extended stay suites that Holiday Inn, others use, utilizing prefabricated modular building techniques and getting things up sooner and quicker. I like that you've nodded your head so much during this short time, and I'll leave it at that. Thank you, sir.
Well, you're easy to please then. CCH has done some pretty serious exploring of prefabricated construction. The new president of Christian Church Homes has flown to Idaho, where they have a couple of major plants that produce prefabricated buildings, modular housing. Here's a little silly historical trivia for you. Modular housing was quite popular in the 1970s and got beaten out by the construction unions because the construction unions didn't get all the hours of work because a lot of work was done with prefabricated housing. So CCH has several of our older buildings that were built with prefabricated housing, stack-up modules, when it was popular in the late 70s and early 80s. And it fell out of vogue, and now it's coming back again. So CCH is very interested in doing a prefabricated construction. I kind of lost track. Were there more questions in there? I can't hear you, David.
Yeah, the other thing is that really the alternative now to tax credits is voucher-based project vouchers, and
Yeah. So let me speak to
there
that
is
for
a
just a second.
tremendous potential here with project-based vouchers.
Yeah. Securing Section 8. Section 8 is the federal program where someone, where a tenant, a low-income tenant, pays 30% of their income for rent. So if you're a very low-income person and your monthly income is $1,000, a third of that is $333. So your rent would be $333. So, but the rent that the landlord needs to run that place may be $3,000 or $4,000. So either HUD directly from Washington, D.C., or HUD through your local housing authority pays the landlord the rest of that rent. The low-income tenant pays me $333, and the Section 8 project-based voucher pays me another $2,700 every single month. I would love to get Section 8. Section 8 solves all problems. If you can't get Section 8, then one of the solutions is to beat down or eliminate any kind of mortgage you might have. That's why we're looking for free dollars from the tax credit program, free dollars from the county, free dollars from the state. Oftentimes when you're building a building, you might have 7 sources of money. You're hoping that's a grant from the city, a grant from the county, a grant from the state, a grant from the tax credits. So when you open for business, you don't have a mortgage, no debt service. So now I can charge much smaller rents. So if I have Section 8, then I can have a mortgage. I will say our Section 8 rents here are $2,500 a month. Mrs. Jones will only pay $300, and the federal government will pay the rest through project-based vouchers. If we can't get project-based vouchers, then we have to try and get as much free construction money as possible. And that's real estate development in 60 seconds or less.
Fantastic. Interesting to have both of you on here because it sounds like it takes a village to do this kind of thing for one way to say it, but Don with your expertise and Jen with all of the advocacy and policy, and we know that a lot of the challenge can be the NIMBYism and as you say, the local policies that get in the way. And so, boy, I'm excited about the prospects that we have, and we need way more time to spend on this than what we have tonight to do. We have other questions, but any specific questions at this point? Don, please.
I'll just say that I have queued up here, if you want to see it, a 3-minute cartoon video on what goes into real estate, which is just a video version and a cartoon version of what I just said. How do you raise all that money? How do you buy the land? How do you create partnerships? And if you don't want to take the time to see that now, you can go to our website. That little video is featured on our website. And it's a 3-minute cartoon video that lays it out very nicely.
Right. I'm afraid that our recording might cut in the middle of this because it does 1 hour. But could you put the link up there?
Can you give me a share screen thing again? Or
yes, go right ahead and share your screen there.
Okay, here we go. Well, rats. Now I can't find it.
Down at the bottom of your screen, I believe.
Yeah, I did that and I can't find.
All right.
I wonder if this is going to do anything here.
There we go. That was it.
Yeah, but that's not what I wanted to share. So the CCH website is www.cchnc. NC is for Northern California. cchnc.org. And on the opening page, there's a little cartoon image. If you click on that, you'll see this little 3-minute video.
Right. Why don't you go ahead and run it? Let's see what happens.
Well, that means I got to find it.
You're on the spot.
Yeah. So how do I'm going to try and open that website. All right, so there it is. Play, stop. go back to Zoom.
Share.
Zoom. There you are. Boy, you gotta be smarter than a computer. Da-da-da-da. So I have another page open on my computer here, and I can't find it when I click on things to
Okay.
share.
Right, well. There we go.
Sorry.
Yeah, Pastor Peter has put the link here up on the screen. And so indeed, let's direct people to that link to see.
Well, bingo. And is one of you smart enough to go to that link?
Right. Or Bob, can you make me a host? I can just do it for him.
Certainly.
And I can walk you through it.
Okay. All right.
Here we go.
Bingo. So there's the video, and there's got a play button on it. And then you want to maximize that screen. Very good.
Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. This famous quote from Margaret Mead lives at the heart of Christian church homes. Started by a handful of church leaders who saw the need for affordable housing, Christian Church Homes, known today as CCH, has been developing affordable quality senior housing in caring communities since 1961. For almost 60 years, we have worked with many religious organizations to expand their mission of service through senior housing and property management. Now, CCH operates in over 8 states, serving approximately 5,000 residents. Our vision is to transform communities by fostering human dignity, mutual respect, personal independence, and supportive environments. It's a vision often shared with many of our church partners. As a faith-based nonprofit, we have the level of understanding and sensitivity needed to work with church leaders while effectively managing the complex compliance, ownership, and regulatory issues pertaining to affordable housing development. Considerate of the nuances of church operations, key decision makers, and the local congregation, we take the time to walk partners through each phase of development. We understand that transparency, mission compatibility, and accountability are essential in any successful business partnership. At the start, we spend time learning about your organization and its vision for your building and its use. As we explore options, we review possible financing structures, related constraints from the city and state, architectural options for your neighborhood, address neighborhood support or concerns, as well as practical logistics for a possible renovation or new construction. Together, we can help build a lasting legacy for your church and a better future for your local community members. Let us help you decide if affordable housing and CCH offer the right fit for your mission and its legacy.
Okay, well, thanks for your help in doing that.
Welcome.
Excellent. Thank you very much. And it's probably a great way to close. I want to pass this back over to Fran. And let's take it from there. There's actually a thought is I had no intention of cutting this short because what you're saying is so valuable to us and so important to us. But I think is a matter of making our promise to you, keeping our promise to you. We should look forward to getting together more and soon. Thank you.
Definitely. Yeah, I wanted to thank everyone for being here tonight and so thoughtful and meaningful. And I'm struck by something Jen had said about moving the discussion from buildings to people. And I love that. And it's very much what we're facing as a church too, and why we've had trying to discern what our community needs are, what's going on locally. And then to have the buildings more secondary too. But this is such an important topic that has affected everyone in our county since 2017. So yeah, we'll just a lot to think about and digest, and we hope to remain partners in this journey we're heading on. So thank you again, Dawn and Jen, and thanks everyone for being here tonight and everyone watching the recording. So
Thanks for having us.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen.
Good night.